This amp is 50 years old. It might be the best Deluxe reverb I've ever played through. The gentleman who modified this amp in 1975 upgraded every component in it that wasn't up to snuff because of mass production. Not only did he make this amp sound great, but he upgraded and modified the amps of every recording guitar player on the West Coast. So Paul Rivera literally changed the sound of music, the sound of the records that we all know and love. We're going to talk to Paul, and then we'll listen to one of his new amps. But first, take a listen to this. And how did Jay Graydon find out about you?
Dean Parks.
Oh, that's right, Dean. And how did you meet Dean?
I had modified an amp or something, and
Yeah.
Dean had said, I've got this Princeton, what can you do with the Princeton? So I modified Dean's amp, and he was thrilled with it, and then he turned Graydon onto it, and turned Carlton onto it, and then it just snowballed. And then the guys from Valley Arts, actually it was Jay that said, hey man, you ought to go talk to Mike and Al. They got this cool store, Valley Arts. So I went down to Valley Arts and I met, Mike and Al, Mike McGuire and Al Carnes. We started talking. He goes, well, if you want to open shop here, we got an extra place upstairs.
That place, I wish it was still open. I moved here in
my
1979, and just as soon as I was earning enough money, I started spending it there. Steve Lukather ended up having his amps modded by you too.
Oh yeah, I was Mr. Rivera to him. He was 16 years old, might have even been 15. He brought me a Princeton and said, Mr. Rivera, can you please modify this?
As I remember at that time, he would bring your Deluxes, and then he would bring a pair of 100-watt Marshalls.
I modified his Marshalls as well. Yes, I modified his quite a few Marshalls. I did extra tube, extra gain stage.
Yeah.
Master volume, and so on. If you want to hear it, just listen to Van Halen on Beat It. That's one of my modified Marshalls. Quick process. I take the boards, I strip all the components off of it. I use Lemon Joy, which was Ed John's favorite because it has no phosphorus in it. And I'll wash the boards, super wash the boards, and then rinse them very carefully, and then stick them in a toaster oven at low temperature for a couple days to drive out all the moisture. And then I wax dip it to seal it. And then I put the components back on the board. And that way it sounds correct because there's no electrical leakage between the little eyelets on the board.
The red and black dual pots combine speed and intensity on the tremolo, and then intensity becomes master volume.
None of these pull. So this was a stage one where I'd goose it for some gain, put a master volume on it, to correct any of the issues in it. Of course, change the power supply with different filter caps, et cetera, et cetera.
Before we hear more great stories from Paul, I just want to take 1 minute and show you his new amp. Now, this is not a sponsored video. If you want to support the channel, click the link below. We're giving away a new collection of 30 free guitar lessons. Now, Paul is rare because he still runs his own company after decades of making amps sound great. You can buy his amps at Sweetwater. This is a special edition that you have to buy at Norm's Rare Guitars. Now, I'm going to try something unusual with the solo. This was a happy accident. I plugged an expression pedal into the foot switch jack on the front of the amp. So what I'm doing in the solo, I'm playing low phrases through the clean channel for definition, and then high phrases through the lead channel for a creamy overdrive sound. And then, of course, I just forget about everything and play. Paul will explain the features of this amp in a minute, but check out this solo first. I read that Fender hired you 1981.
Yes. Secretly, January of 81, publicly, June of 81.
Am I correct in they actually hired you because you became a great asset to a company they were thinking of selling?
Precisely. Exactly. And then as I became less naive with the different corporate meetings, and then I realized, sure, they're pumping it up just so they can sell it for something.
Well, I have to say, you did a great thing by creating all of those blackface amps, including the Super Champs.
I think I did a total of 72 pieces.
Excellent.
Variants. You know, we did a whole solid state series.
I read about that.
Solid state series, check this out. I had to overcome the psychological barrier. So anyway, so the musicians come in, I flip the power switch, I said, you know, you got to give it a few minutes, tubes got to warm up, so on and so forth. So I could bypass the psychoacoustics of me telling them it's a solid state amp.
Amazing.
So they'd plug in and play, oh man, this is great. Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I could get true feedback from what they were listening to rather than predispose, oh, it's solid state, shit, why'd you do that? You know, so we had a very successful solid state series, bottom line. When I came to Fender, I was so pissed off with CBS quality cutting corners. Like, for example, the vinyl. I went to Macklin Fabrics and I said, the vinyl we're using sucks. And I said, I need the toughest Tolex you guys have. Now, Tolex is a trademark of General Tire and Rubber, but it's generic for us, just like Kleenex is, right?
Got it.
So anyway, Macklin said, well, we have some unusual backing material. We have this poplin that I'm going to bring you just the fabric and see if you can tear it. Because in my brain, Fender amps go in the back of a rusty pickup, get dragged across the pickup truck, and then dragged across the floor in the club, and you don't want it to look like shit after the second times they use it, right? So Macklin made us a special Tolex, or vinyl, textured vinyl, that we used from then on. You know, so it was that kind of detail. We went back to pine cabinets. So, you know, like for instance, finger jointed pine cabinets. Okay, so I pioneered, like, this is the way you guys used to do it. This is what needs to be done. So we would lay up pine in the machines where you would lay up solid bodies, right? And so there'd be no cupping in the pine. And then Horst Apsman, who was the factory manager, went to Germany and got this super high performance machine for notching, putting the joints on the wood, just this whole process to bring Fender amps back to the point where it was just like, fuck, this is quality.
Okay, so you were kind of hired to save Fender amps, and you kind of did.
Yes. I brought them back in the amp business. Fender circuit boards of this era, maybe earlier in this era, were not wax coated.
Okay.
They absorb minerals and humidity from the air. So for instance, if you had a Fender amp and you lived in Huntington Beach, your amp over the next year of you moving there will change tone radically because the component board starts conductivity issues. So when I would get these amps, one of the first things I did was make sure that there was no leakage on the board from deposits of minerals, et cetera, et cetera. Now, eventually, somebody in Fender, and it was really Ed Johns, said, we can solve this problem if we actually dip these boards in wax, drive out all the moisture, and that's when they changed to the boards having wax on them in order to avoid that issue.
Okay.
But there's a couple 100,000 Fender amps that were made that have those issues. I mean, I can't even tell you how bad they were. And it was incredible because you'd think, well, they all use same pots, same blah, blah, blah. But there's in most amplifiers, it's called stacking of tolerance. Each component is plus or minus 10% or 20%.
Yeah.
Imagine the end result isn't necessarily.
No, if everything is 10 or 20% one way or the other, it's just going to be a zigzag to who knows what, right?
Exactly, correct.
Oh, gosh, yeah. So this is the Super Champ of 2024.
That's correct.
So
yeah,
let's talk about it.
Yeah. So it's, you know, 2 channels. It's got 2 independent channels. One channel, here's the deal is, I love monster headroom. Yeah. I want to hear an L5 with a discordant tone, discordant chord with all kinds of weird dissonance clean through the amplifier. To me, that's like a big test.
Well, on stage too, with the drummer, you have to have that.
So we have that in this channel. And then the other channel has got a high gain lead channel, and it's very sweet, of course, with its own independent EQ, and it's of course got a mechanical reverb. An electronic digital reverb, while it's much cheaper and much easier, is like the antithesis to me of what a reverb should sound like in a tube amp.
And especially when you start to distort it, you can really hear how
Yes.
they kind of comb together,
Yes,
and it
that's
really
right.
creates a warmth. And then the back?
In the
You've got
back.
silent speaker options, right?
Yeah, we've got a load box built in that you can run it silently. And then you can, there's a headphone jack with a level control for people. There's 6 different cabinet voicings that are there for the XLR out. It even has things like a phase switch and a ground lift switch and an effects loop for you to patch effects. And so you're able to actually take this to a club, run it through the PA, get a great cab sound through it. And this is all analog too, by the way. So instead of using, you know, a digital interface for the cab sounds, we actually created it.
What size speaker is in this?
This is a special 10-inch speaker that's built for us by Eminence, and let me tell you where that came from. My favorite speaker was an Oxford 10-inch that was used in a variety of super reverbs, 66, 67, right? I would play that 10-inch speaker and go, perfection, this is the best sounding 10 there is. And I had some. And I sent them to Eminence. And I said, this is what I want. We had, I don't know, 10 or 15 iterations of it that would come back. And we finally got that. And I just went, stop, lock that one in. And I've been using this 10 since we started production on our M&S Series 410s in 1987, 88, sometime around there. So it's been a long time. And so I just recently got a batch from Eminence. Eminence sold to an Italian speaker company, BC Speakers. And the guy at Eminence said, you really ought to put an order in right now and buy some. We got some parts in stock. Why don't you get a load? So I got a big truck came with 10-inch speakers because I was afraid we'd never get them again.
Right. So this batch of these, who knows how long it's going to last, has that speaker.
And it has EL34s,
Yeah, great.
which is my favorite output tube.
Hey guys, a lot of the time YouTube will bring you my videos even though you're not subscribed. If you get the chance, click this subscribe button and ring the bell.